My son, one of the most important rules in this village is never to whistle at night. Welcome to African Tales by Chinua, a home of unique African tales. In the quiet village of Umudim, deep in the heart of Igbo land, an old belief had been passed down for generations. Never whistle at night lest you call the spirits. The elders told this to every child, every visitor, and every wandering stranger. But, as with many old superstitions, there was always someone who dared to challenge it. Obinna had never been to the village before. He was born and raised in the bustling city of Lagos. He was used to bright street lights, the endless hum of cars, and the distant sound of Afro beats blaring from some roadside shop. The silence of the village unnerved him. It was too quiet, as if the night was listening. His parents had sent him to Umudim to spend the holidays with his grandmother, Mama Neka. They claimed it would be good for him, that he needed to connect with his roots. He wasn't sure what that meant. On his first night, as he sat outside with a lantern flickering beside him, Mama Neka joined him, lowering herself onto a wooden stool with the ease of someone who had seen many years but carried them lightly. She sighed and gazed at the dark sky. "The air is different here, isn't it?" Obinna nodded. "It's too quiet." Mama Neka chuckled. "That is because the night here is alive." Obinna frowned. "Alive how?" She looked at him with sharp, knowing eyes. "There are things that move in the dark, Obinna. Things you don't see, but they see you. That is why there are rules." He rolled his eyes. "Rules?" She ignored his skepticism and continued. "My son, one of the most important rules in this village is never to whistle at night." Obinna raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Mama Neka leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because whistling is a call, and when you call, something always answers." Obinna smirked. "You mean like ghosts?" Her gaze did not waver. "Not ghosts, my son. Worse." He scoffed. "Come on, Mama. That's just an old people's tale to scare children." Mama Neka sighed. "City boy, you think you know everything, but let me warn you, this is not the city. Here, the night listens, and if you disrespect it, it will remind you of its power." Obinna laughed. "Okay, Mama, I promise not to whistle." But he was only half listening. Days after his arrival, Obinna decided to explore the village. He had grown tired of the slow pace, the never-ending silence, and the absence of anything fun. As he wandered near the stream where their village boys played, he met Ikenna. Ikenna was about his age, but unlike Obinna, he was lean from years of climbing trees and chasing goats through the hills. He had dark skin that gleamed under the sun and eyes that carried the sharpness of someone who knew things Obinna did not. "City boy," Ikenna greeted with a teasing grin. "How do you like the village?" "It's different," Obinna admitted. "No Wi-Fi, no TV, just trees and silence." Ikenna laughed. "Good. That means you can finally hear yourself think." Obinna snorted. "All I hear are rules." "Rules keep people alive," Ikenna said simply. Obinna folded his arms. Like the one about whistling at night, Ikenna's smile faded. He turned to look at Obinna with serious eyes. "Who told you about that?" "My grandmother," Obinna said with a shrug. "She said whistling at night calls spirits." Ikenna exhaled. "Then you should listen to her." Obinna scoffed. "Come on. You actually believe that stuff?" Ikenna's jaw tightened. "I don't believe." "I know." Obinna raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me you've seen something before?" Ikenna was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. 3 years ago," he began, his voice lower, "there was a boy here. His name was Chukwudi. He was like you, came from the city to visit his grandmother, thought all our stories were foolish." Obinna listened, intrigued. One night, to prove the elders wrong, he went outside and whistled. A chill ran through Obinna, but he didn't interrupt. Ikenna's expression darkened. The next morning, they found his slippers at the edge of the forest, but no one ever saw him again. Obinna frowned. Maybe he ran away. Ikenna shook his head. "Nobody ever leaves this village without the elders knowing." He was taken by what? Obinna asked, his throat suddenly dry. Ikenna leaned in, lowering his voice even more. Some say the Ndiinche, the night watchers, took him. They are not human, not spirits either, just things that roam the darkness, looking for those who break the rules. Obinna forced a laugh. You're messing with me. Ikenna stared at him, unblinking. I wish I was. For the first time, Obinna felt uneasy. Maybe Mama Neka and Ikenna weren't just making up stories. That night, as he lay on his bamboo mat, the silence of the village felt heavier than before. He turned to the window, half expecting to see something watching him from the trees. And for the first time, he wondered, what if they were right? But curiosity was a dangerous thing. The days passed, and Obinna got used to the slow rhythm of the village, waking up to the sound of roosters, fetching water from the well and eating pounded yam made fresh by Mama Neka's skilled hands. But the nights still unsettled him. There were no streetlights, no distant honking of cars, just the deep, endless blackness of the village night. It felt like the darkness had a presence, like it was watching. One night, as Obinna lay on his bamboo mat, the silence felt suffocating. He was restless, bored, and then he remembered Mama Neka's warning. A mischievous grin spread across his face. What if he tested it? What was the worst that could happen? So just for fun, he whistled. A sharp, clear sound cut through the silence. Then, nothing. Obinna smirked. See? Nothing happened. Then, a whistle came back. Slow, hollow, wrong. Obinna's body locked up. It hadn't echoed off the hut's walls. It hadn't come from the trees. It had come from directly outside the window. His breath turned shallow. His skin prickled as the air in the room changed. Thick, suffocating, heavy. The lantern beside him flickered wildly. Then, knock, knock, knock. Obinna's blood ran cold. The sound wasn't frantic or polite. It was deliberate, slow, waiting, expecting. A chill crawled up his spine. His fingers dug into the mat as he struggled to convince himself it was just a prank. Maybe Ikenna was trying to scare him. But then, knock, knock, knock. This time, from the back of the hut. Obinna's heart stopped. The first knock had come from the front door. This one had come from behind the house. Something was moving. Around him, his breath hitched. The crickets had gone silent. The night air, which had been humid earlier, now felt freezing. Then, tap, tap, tap. His eyes darted to the window. A shadow loomed against the moonlight, tall, too tall. Its fingers, long, unnaturally thin fingers, were tapping lightly against the glass. Obinna wanted to scream, but his throat had closed up. The thing at the window shifted. It had no face, no eyes, but it was looking directly at him. Then slowly, it lifted its hand and mimicked his whistle, a perfect, chilling imitation of the sound he had made. Obinna's chest was constricted. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. Then, the door creaked open, not slammed, not forced. It opened gently, as though whatever was outside was invited in. A gust of ice-cold air rushed through the room. The lantern flickered again, then died completely. Obinna was plunged into total darkness. The sound of bare feet scuffing against the floor filled the room. Something was inside with him now. His body refused to move. A slow, rattling breath sounded just inches from his face. Then, a whisper, right beside his ear. Obinna. His heart nearly burst from his chest. It knew his name. It was standing over him. Then, a sudden, sharp, scraping noise. Something was dragging its nails, no, its claws, across the wooden floor. Closer, closer. His lips parted in a silent scream. Then, a sound like bones snapping. The thing tilted its head at an unnatural angle. It was studying him, and then it opened its mouth. No lips, no tongue, just an endless black void. And from that darkness came another whistle. But this time, it didn't stop. The sound grew and twisted, turning into something far worse. It was not just a whistle anymore, it was a call. From outside the hut, Something answered, a second whistle, then a third, then dozens, hundreds, coming from the trees, the fields, the rooftops. The night was waking up. Obinna could not move. The darkness had weight. It pressed against his skin, seeped into his bones, and wrapped around his lungs like invisible hands squeezing the air out of him. His ears rang with the eerie, hollow whistle that had echoed his own. But now the whistling has multiplied. From outside, from inside, from everywhere, the whispers started next. Soft, crawling voices slithering through the air like invisible snakes. Obinna, you called us. A gust of ice-cold wind swept through the room, though the windows were shut. The lantern had gone out, leaving only the dim glow of the moon leaking through the cracks in the walls. Then, the air shifted. The smell changed. The hut no longer smelled of wood and palm oil. It smelled of decay, of damp earth, of something long dead. Obinna's breath hitched. Something was in here with him. It was getting closer. The ground beneath him shuddered. The wooden floor groaned. The walls seemed to pulse. The room was warping. The door slammed shut on its own. The window's cracks vanished as though they had never been there. The hut was no longer his grandmother's hut. It was something else now, a different place, a different realm. Obinna's heartbeat pounded so hard he thought his chest would burst. He forced himself to turn his head, and his body was no longer in the hut. He was standing in a field of endless black mist, his feet no longer touching solid ground. The air vibrated with whispers. The sky, if it was a sky, swirled with shadows that had no form, yet too many faces. The world around him was shifting, alive, moving, changing. The trees were not trees, they twisted and twitched as though they had spines. Then from the darkness they stepped forward, tall, faceless, their bodies stretching and bending as if made of smoke and bone. Their fingers were too long, their heads tilted at unnatural angles, moving in sharp, jerky motions. And they were coming for him. Obinna tried to run, but he could not. His feet did not obey. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. A shadowy hand stretched toward him, its fingers elongating, reaching for his throat. Then, it grabbed him, cold, so cold, pierced his skin like burning ice. His body seized up, his vision flickered. The world was pulling him down. He was leaving reality, being taken. The voices in the mist grew louder. You called us, Obinna. Now you are ours. The spirits dragged him deeper into the black mist. His body sank, dissolving, as though he was being swallowed whole by the night itself. His fingers cleared at nothing. He tried to fight, tried to resist, but their grip was absolute. He was going to disappear, forever. But Obinna finally found his voice. He screamed. Then, the door slammed open. A sudden explosion of white powder filled the room. A sharp hiss tore through the air, followed by a guttural screech. Obinna's eyes snapped open. Mama Neka stood at the entrance, clutching a bowl of Nzu, sacred chalk in one hand and a bundle of udo leaves in the other. Her face was fierce. She scattered another handful of the sacred chalk, and the thing reeled back, its form flickering like a dying flame. With a final, inhuman screech, it vanished, melting into the darkness as though it had never been there. The hut fell into complete silence. Obinna gasped for air, his entire body shaking violently. Mama Neka turned to him, her eyes burning with anger. You foolish child, she spat. He could barely speak. What was that? She knelt beside him, grabbing his trembling shoulders. You called it, and it came. Obinna swallowed hard, his pulse thudding in his ears. Mama Neka's voice was low, filled with something close to fear. The night is not empty, and it does not forgive so easily. Obinna never spoke of that night. For days, he barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the weight of the cold hands that had almost taken him, heard the whispers slithering through the darkness, calling his name. Obinna became very scared of the night, and the village boys teased him when he refused to walk outside after dark, but Ikenna never laughed. He simply met Obinna's gaze with knowing eyes and said, You saw them, didn't you? Obinna never answered. He didn't have to. When the holidays ended and his parents came to take him back to Lagos, Obinna felt a strange mix of relief and fear. He was leaving the village. The whispers, the shadows, the thing that had almost dragged him away. But as he hugged Mama Neka goodbye, she held him tightly and whispered in his ear, "They do not forget so easily." Her words sent a chill through his spine. Back in the city, life moved fast. Cars honked. Music blasted from speakers. The night was never silent, never waiting. But Obinna had changed. He never whistled, not when he walked alone, not when he showered, not when he was distracted and humming along to a song, not even when he thought no one was listening, because he knew better now. One night, months later, as he lay in bed, the city buzzing outside his window, he heard something, a whistle, faint, hollow, not from the street, not from the TV, from his window. The curtains were closed, but the sound drifted in, curling into the room like a whisper from a memory that refused to die. Obinna held his breath. Obinna! A cold dread slithered down his spine. His fingers gripped the bedsheet. He didn't move, didn't answer, didn't breathe. He knew the rules now, and after a long moment, after the silence stretched and the air thinned, the presence faded. The whisper melted back into the night, and the darkness finally let him go. For now. Curiosity is good, but when it turns to arrogance, it invites danger. Obinna's refusal to respect the wisdom of the elders led him to a terrifying encounter. Some boundaries exist for a reason. Not everything unknown is unreal. Just because you don't believe in something doesn't mean it isn't real. Some truths are not seen, only felt. The night has its own rules. Respect them or be ready to pay the price. Tradition and superstition often carry hidden wisdom. Sometimes breaking the rules doesn't just bring consequences, it brings things you can never escape. If you were in Obinna's place, alone in that dark hut, hearing your own whistle being mimicked from the shadows, would you have the courage to stay silent? Or would fear make you whistle again, calling whatever was waiting in the night? Leave your comments in the comment section and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.